Everything changed when the bombs fell, except for war. Playing our way through the wasteland. Won't you come along? Everybody fall out. Fall out.
Welcome back to Too Much Future, the show where we play through the Fallout games and we talk about them. We are playing Fallout New Vegas. We've played Fallout 1, played Fallout 2, played Fallout 3, and now we're playing New Vegas. We are 4 episodes into New Vegas. This is episode 4. We're going to the Strip this time. I am Cameron.
I'm
With
Michael.
me as always. It's Michael.
It's Michael.
Michael. This is, we went to the Strip. You know, last time we hung out with the king, who you don't mess with the king. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big part of it's a big part of king lore.
Right. It's one of those king things that I hear so much about.
Yeah, but no relation, of course. A king thing, no relation. But I guess I should warn people too. I should let them know that. Because you're pre-warned. I had 1 hour of sleep. I'm recording this on the smallest little baby's amounts. Actually, it is kind of like a baby's amounts of sleep. I've heard that babies don't sleep too much. Is that true?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that I'm an expert in babies now, and babies actually never sleep.
What?
Babies
It's
sleep
like
for 5 minutes a day. That's it.
Well, they don't. I like that infinite increase you just gave them, by the way, from 0 to 5. That's a big jump. But no, I like the idea that like it's only when they're no longer babies. So like they achieve self-awareness, and in that moment they go directly to sleep. And that's a big part of like baby life.
That's what happens when consciousness is manifest.
Yeah, it's the mirror stage.
Yeah.
You look at it and you ever see an ego so brutal you go immediately to sleep?
Yes.
Oh, but yeah, so we are, there are these robots that were keeping us from doing what we want to do in our lives. Last episode, it was these robots who were saying, you need either some money or a passport to get onto the Strip. And we said, hey, we got money, we got passports, we're ready to do that. The end of last episode, I walked through the doors and then saved the game and quit. So I loaded this game, and I think this is probably going to be a little bit of a shorter episode for us, maybe, just because we did less stuff, I think, than we normally do. We're cramming quite a bit into these episodes normally. So this is maybe a little bit more leisurely. Maybe we can kind of talk about the vibes, of where we are in New Vegas right now. But two big, kind of quests we got going on here. Actually, just one kind of big quest, I guess. At the moment that we walk through that door is find Benny, the guy who, during the opening cinematic, shot us in the head and left us for dead. And that's like the thing that Tonk is thinking about doing. I feel like Lucky Nell has got some other stuff. I don't know. What'd you end up doing once you walk through those doors?
Well, you step in, and New Vegas is interesting. The Strip is interesting as a location. There is a very strong sort of sense of having, to sort of harken back to something we were talking about, I think, in the first episode. One of the things that struck me very early on, kind of leaving Good Springs and running around and fighting geckos, was how much it felt like I was in the wilderness. And also how surprised I was to realize how prior to Fallout 3, that sense of like walking through kind of a vast and empty-ish wilderness was sort of part of what Fallout was for me. I don't mean that in like, the secret criteria for Fallout that were written on my heart, but just in terms of what were the things that sort of felt like Fallout to me in those first two games. And it turned out that one of them was this sense of like, oh, there are places, right? There are locations, there are settlements, there are cities. But in between them, there is vast, vast amounts of nothing. there's just hills and dry lake beds and deserts and things of that nature. And when you get through that and you come into something like in Fallout 2, New Reno, which is like big and built out and has lots of stuff going on, it really feels like a change in scenery, especially compared to like smaller towns. And then in Fallout 3, I felt like, you do have your bigger and larger settlements, but because I guess like the DC metro area is so built up, there is almost never a point where you're not just crawling through the wreckage of a suburb.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of feels like, I'm always in the wreckage of one very, very large metro area. There is not really a sense of non-peopled, right? Like a sense of like space between settlements. Everything feels kind of continuous in that way. And so New Vegas kind of returns again. We've noted this multiple times that New Vegas is kind of returning to Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 stuff. Just sort of like dials that all up to 11 with the strip, because it's a big settlement. There are people walking around, they're talking, there's music playing. There aren't really it's not like Freeside, which we just came through, where there were criminals spawning constantly and trying to rob us or whatever. So it's a very interesting vibe as you first walk in. And then for me, at least, I was waylaid by Victor, who shows up and he's like, "Hey man, good to see you. You need to talk to Mr. House. Mr. House actually wants to see you. He's invited you personally up into his casino, the Lucky 38. So you better not keep him waiting." And I'm like, well, that seems like a nice invitation, I guess. I don't know why Mr. House would want to talk to me, because I'm just here to kill Benny. So I ignore that invitation for the time being and head off to find Benny, who we know, because we've asked around, is going to be hanging out in the Tops Casino. One detail that I do like about this is that after Victor talks to you, because he's a Securitron, his screen switches over from the friendly cowboy to a regular robot, or like regular Securitron robot with like the cop face. So you can kind of put it together that whatever Victor is, he's basically a program or a routine that's being beamed out to these Securitrons, on behalf of Mr. House. We can now probably assume. But that's...
I hate that robot. I think he's the devil.
I love Victor. I wish there was a way that, like, I don't know, you could... I should look it up. I wonder if there's like something on Nexus mods, like make Victor king of New Vegas.
I just want him to be able to fight to the death with other robots. Like I said, I believe in last episode, my wish remains the same.
Oh. Well, yeah. So that's what I did. Is I went straight to the Tops. Ignored that invitation because Eleanor had business to do. Did you go see Mr. House, or did you also go to the Tops?
I also went to the Tops. I thought, you know what, we need to. Because I had the barest little dim bulb in my head, and as we get to especially to this midpoint, or I mean it's not really the actual midpoint of the game, but where the game really kind of explodes open and you kind of start taking the different pathways that you can, I've realized I don't remember. I've remembered very little up to this point. I don't remember anything narratively. Other than, I guess, the end of the game, or at least one of the ends of the game at this point. So everything really is kind of surprising. Like, some images are like, oh, yeah, I remember this. Like, when I eventually talked to Mr. House, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this, like, big apparatus. But it was actually kind of shocking to be like, oh, yeah, I don't really remember that much of what's going on here. But, yeah, I thought it'd be better to do the Benny stuff first, because I thought maybe Mr. House might take me to, like, some sort of place of no return or something. So yeah, I went right to the Tops, where everyone is a chairman. I don't, why? What's going on with that? Is this like a Vegas thing I don't understand?
I'm not entirely certain, but I mean, like, that's their gang name, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's the whole thing about the chairman as a group is that they're kind of like, in the same way that the Kings are an Elvis gang, the chairmen are kind of like a Frank Sinatra gang.
Yeah.
So give me a second here. I'm just going to Google Chairman Sinatra and see what comes up.
Yeah. Was he the chairman?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, no, it seems like he was called the chairman of the board. So that was one of his
got
nicknames.
It. Okay. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because there's a also in the Tops Casino there's the Rad Pack or whatever, which is a group of performers who are singers. That makes sense. It's all kind of Sinatra-y. Here's another clarifying question before we kind of move forward narratively. Why is it called the Lucky 38? Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it? What is that a gambling thing? What's the 38?
I don't know.
Is it the gun like a 38?
I don't know. Let's do it right on air because we're such good podcasters. Let's check the trivia behind the scenes. Lucky 38. It's based on the Stratosphere, Las Vegas, and former landmark. Owned by Howard Hughes. That's fine. The name Lucky 38 is a reference to the 38 numbers on a roulette table. The sign looks like a stylized roulette wheel and betting layout, and the top tower is modeled after a roulette wheel. Pre-war posters for the Lucky 38 have the slogan, "Take her for a spin."
What? That really doesn't make a lot of sense. It'd be like having a big deck of cards. It's like the Lucky 52.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make... There's really only like one lucky card for you if you're like playing blackjack or something, you know. I'm going to give that a flavor fail. I'm going to give that a 1-star flavor fail. But good to know. I assumed it was something gambling related. Or it could have just been an extremely lucky gun, and that would have been very cool. But, okay. You went over to see what Benny was all about. What'd you get up to here?
Well, I pop in and they take away your guns. Another kind of old Fallout throwback where there are places where you can't go if you have weapons and so on. Although I am glad that they removed the thing where if you walk into a place like a settlement with a weapon drawn, everyone will be like hateful or hostile towards you. That's nice. Anyhow.
Well, did you talk to Mr. Holdout?
No, I didn't.
Oh, really?
No.
He like auto talked to me when I went through the gate. That's interesting. There's a guy named Mr. Holdout who's like hanging around, kind of near the Gomorrah casino, and he was like, "Hey, you like having a little bit of extra protection?" And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And he kind of explained, "Hey, when you go in these casinos, they take all your weapons away, but I sell weapons that if you don't want them to take them away, it gives you a little bit of extra confidence." And so he sells like brass knuckles, straight razors, a stiletto knife, and something else too. Like there's like 4 or 5. And so yeah, so you can, if you have those weapons, you can hold them back and still have a weapon. So as someone who already had straight razors and knives all in his inventory, Tonk is prepared for casino stuff. So and when they talk to you at the casino, they say, it basically says like hand over your weapons, you know, in the dialogue menu. It says like hand over your weapons, or like, and then the second one's like hand over your weapons except for holdouts or something like that. There's like a specific, it's almost like a lie option, and then they're just still in your inventory and you can use them.
So funnily enough, I do meet Mr. Holdout, but very later on in this episode in a very strange situation where he does me no favors. So I'll cover that when we get to it.
Yeah.
So I go in and I sort of scope out the tops, the casino. I actually go up and I meet Tommy Tarini, who is the leader of the Rad Pack. Kind of, appears to be sort of based on Sammy Davis Jr. in a way. And he is, he and the Rad Pack are having a great time here at the Tops, but they need more acts because they are, the stage show. And they want more acts. So Tommy Tarini tells me, like, hey, if you happen to meet anyone out in the wasteland, here are my cards. Like, send people my way. And it so happens that I have met a few people in my travels. So one of the things I end up doing in this episode is bamfing around the map a little bit and picking up some acts for Tommy. But I'll cover that later. Because the first thing that I do really is I'm trying to figure out where Benny is. And I find him over near the gambling area, surrounded by guards who are all saying, threatening things to me, telling me not to do any funny stuff or whatever. And I just walk right up to Benny and I say hi. He is really surprised to see me on account of the fact that he thinks I'm supposed to be dead. And lucky Nell, has a perk called Black Widow that allows me to immediately and ceaselessly start hitting on Benny in just like the most sort of aggressive way possible. And this, again, weirds him out a lot. He's like, did that bullet scramble your brain? And I am just, using Black Widow to say things to him like, yeah, why don't we just like come see me in private, like come talk to me, and he's like, man, you're one sick pussycat. All of Benny's dialogue is extremely funny.
He says one of the weirdest pieces of dialogue I've ever heard in a video game.
Okay.
Like at the very beginning of when you're talking to him in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He like turns around and sees him. He's like, okay, let's keep everything smooth. I even wrote it down. He's like, let's keep everything smooth. Quote, smooth moves like smooth little babies.
He did not say this to me.
Are you kidding me?
No, he did not say this.
He said I wrote it down. It's in my video footage. People can see it. It's right. They're looking at it right now. He said, smooth moves like smooth little babies. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm looking now. I do have the smooth moves for smooth little babies mod installed. Maybe that probably has something to do with it.
Yep. Yeah. So Benny for me is just like, you are extremely weird because I tried to kill you and now you're coming on to me. And I said something like, what if I dig it? And he's like, babe, when I hear dig and see you, all I can think of is a shovel. But eventually, like, he's like, I guess this is what's happening with my life. Sure, lady, like, here's my key, come up to my room and, we're gonna, have a little bit of the old, stuff.
I really thought you were going to go for some sort of 50s euphemism here, but nope, we just went with stuff, huh?
We're going to have a little bit of the old Lucky 38.
There we go. The
Lucky 69.
That should be the name of the casino. Petition for change.org petition to add a mod to the game. Just changes that texture. But so maybe this is a good time too. Is the voice of Benny doing anything for you here? The former Friends Chandler Bing.
I mean, I think I think he does a good job with this character, in my opinion. There's something about the way that it is a guy trying to do a 50s like Sinatra-ish mobster. I just think it works. And I don't know if this is necessarily intentional, but LeBlanc doesn't quite nail like sort of the ethos or the atmosphere of the performance, but he does kind of like nail the delivery of the lines in the way that it makes the character feel very absurd.
Wait, hold on. Is it LeBlanc or is it the other guy?
Oh, Perry?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's like, I never watched Friends.
Hey, he was a huge fan of Fallout 3 and presented Ellen DeGeneres with a signed copy of the game on her show.
Of Fallout 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's neat.
I
thought this was a weird turn for him. But if he was a big fan of Fallout 3, I can see like that's the other thing is that in his performance, he seems like he's having fun with this role.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he's like into it. And he's got more money than God, so he's fine. Yeah, so what'd you do with old Benny here?
So I follow Benny up to his room, and he, makes the obvious sort of overtures to me based on what I have been saying. And so I sleep with him. And he tells me that I have great Charlies. And he asks me to give him a shake for the old Ben man.
What are you saying? What is happening? What are the words you're using?
I mean, this scene is great because so it just it fades to black.
What are Charlies? What are you talking about?
It fades to black, and I know for a fact that there are like sort of variations that happen in this script, and it's like filled with him sort of like giving weird either 50s or sort of like pseudo 50s slang And just anyway, yeah, no, he just sort of says like some extremely weird 50s sex slang, and at the end he asks you to hold him.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, and then you have an option to either kill Benny or fall asleep yourself. Lucky Nell killed him.
Dang.
I mean, you know, she thought about it for a while. This was kind of her goal to, you know, seduce and destroy, because Paul Thomas Anderson is one of her favorite filmmakers. But the you know, the end of it came down to just like, well, you know, is this really honorable? Yes, it is, because he shot me in the head. So killed Benny, and then it fades back in, and it's really great because Benny's corpse spawns floating above the bed and then ragdolls down onto the mattress.
Oh, that's not good. That's bad.
It's like I killed him in his sleep by constructing a gallows. And then somehow like hanging him, and then like, oh, it's great. But yeah, Benny's dead, and his suit is lying on the ground. And I pick that up and I put it on. I take my trophy of the clothes of the man that I just slept with and murdered.
Yeah, I didn't. I walked up to him and I talked to him. I was like, "Hey, what's going on, bud?" I was like, "We need to talk about you shooting me in the head." And he was like, "Yeah, can we talk about this in private?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me think about it. Let's talk about it here." And you said, "No, you know, if you want to talk about it here, we'll talk about it here, but everyone's going to hear it. So, you know, why don't you think about that?" So I exited the dialogue screen and pulled out my straight razor and just hacked him to pieces.
Right there on the floor?
Right there on the floor, and then all of his buddies, and then all of the band, and then the bartender, and then some additional people who just happened to be there. And yeah. I'm currently hated in the strip, by the way. And doing this actually produces some really interesting stuff where other people in the world will say, "Dang, I heard what you did at the Tops Casino." They're like, "Are you the guy who did that at the Tops Casino?" And I can be like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oof, don't do that here." Which is fun.
I just hear people being like, "So I heard Benny got what was coming to him."
Yeah, a lot of interesting. I mean, that's like ambient dialogue that would never, you know. You know, I think about like I think about like finishing Oblivion or getting right to the end, and like, it seems like something's going on, and you know, God, what's the first? There's the first place the Oblivion gates open.
I hear there's an Oblivion gate outside of Kvatch.
Yes, Kvatch. Yes, I something strange going on in Kvatch, and I can be like, yeah, that was like months ago. I've jumped a lot since then. But yeah, so I did that, and I just hacked them all apart, and I got a platinum chip out of it. And I got a presidential suite key. I'm assuming you went up to the presidential suite then.
Yeah,
because you were there, I guess.
Yeah. I think the presidential suite is a different room from Benny's room.
Oh, okay.
Weirdly enough, but yeah, I got all of this same stuff, and this is important, because I was in Benny's room. One of the other things that you can hear from Tommy Turini, because you can ask him about Benny and kind of like what his opinion of Benny is and what Benny's been up to. And Tommy Turini is like, "Oh, you know, Benny, he kind of has this thing where he goes on benders. Like he'll just, you know, sort of disappear. Like he'll disappear from the casino for a week or something, and then he'll come back, and you know, that sort of thing. But his last one, he was gone for almost a month. And that was really weird. And people are starting to think that he's got some girl from Gomorrah probably kept up in his room. So here I am in his room. I'm the only girl here. But there's a doorway in the back, and I open it up, and there's a robot in there, Cameron. It's a big Securitron with a smiley face on it, and his name is Yes Man.
He's friendly.
Yes, very friendly. Did you meet Yes Man?
Yeah, I talked to this guy because when I killed Benny, I got a little quest that was like, you should go see what he was talking to you about. So I went up here and I had this kind of preliminary conversation with Yes Man. But I imagine you know more about it than I do.
I mean, I had a, big, long conversation with Yes Man, who is, along with Victor, I just love all the Securitrons, I guess. I love Yes Man as a character because, well, he's voiced by Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall. And his delivery is so great. I mean, this is just, a comparison of one person to another, but his delivery reminds me of a little bit of like David Cross. Sort of like certain David Cross characters like Tobias on Arrested Development, who are like sort of terminally optimistic about the situation that they're in, or sort of like terminally buoyant. And so Yes Man is a robot that Benny was using to monitor Mr. House's networks. The situation is that Mr. House came into the strip, was always in the strip, but when Mr. House kind of woke up, and cleared out the strip, he kind of chose Benny as his lieutenant. So Benny kind of runs things on the ground at the behest of Mr. House, but Benny has been plotting to betray Mr. House by building this robot that allows him to monitor House's networks. And also the robot has been programmed to volunteer all information when asked and never disagree with anyone who is talking to it, which, as the robot himself says, seems like it was pretty stupid to do. But Yes Man tells me all about like Benny's kind of plots and what he was up to, specifically how Mr. House was looking for the platinum chip, which we now have, and he spent like nearly 1 million caps on salvage teams trying to find it before finally doing so. And then he had this elaborate ruse of all of these couriers, of everyone carrying something, right? One courier would be carrying the platinum chip, but then there would be like 6 other couriers who were carrying junk. And they would all have sort of different routes. And then, the chip would be delivered to Mr. House on the strip. But Benny, who was monitoring these communications, figured out who it was that specifically got the thing House wanted, which was the platinum chip, and then set out and, shot us. So that's how that happened. And what is the platinum chip? Why is it so important? Well, Yes Man explains that it is a data storage device. And he does not know exactly what it does because it's a proprietary format. But his guess is that it's some sort of system upgrade for House's Securitrons. The other thing that Yes Man tells us is that basically he's all set up for what it was Benny wanted him to do. Basically, at some point, Benny, when he kind of finally made his move, was going to use Yes Man to not just monitor the House networks, but like completely take them over after taking out Mr. House. And this is all kind of still there. Like, this could, in theory, right, the tool is there, it could be used. And Yes Man sort of immediately is just like, yeah, why don't you do that? Like, why don't you take over New Vegas? The other thing that is funny about Yes Man, I guess, is that he feels almost like Obsidian parodying video games, because his entire thing is just like, yeah, why don't you just like why don't you do this? Why don't you shape the future of New Vegas? Like, that seems like a fun thing to do. Also, the other thing is that he doesn't believe that you're the courier at first. You can tell him that you're the courier that got shot, and he's like, ha, 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 I know that's not true because you still have a head. And then you can insist on it, and then he kind of feels bad. And also because it's, classic Fallout, you can just be mean to him and then kill him. But I didn't do that. He smiles. I like him. Did you talk extensively with Yes Man? Because he has a lot of stuff to say.
No, I kind of got that initial sketch until it like completed the quest. So he was like, "Yeah, the platinum chip, Mr. House wants it," that kind of thing, and then it like completed the quest mid thing, and I was like, "Okay, I'm not talking to you anymore because you are not what I'm doing in this game." So no, I didn't. What anything else interesting show up then?
Well, he says he sort of like gives you the lay of the land. He's like, if you want to do this thing, if you want to take over New Vegas, you should probably get to know the local tribes. Yes Man likes to talk about tribes. And you can say something like, oh, so I should like go around and see all kind of the tribes and ask them, basically get their support, right? He's like, oh, you don't need their support. You have the Securitrons. You just need to figure out which ones you like and which ones you don't like. And basically lays it out for you. There are the 3 families on the strip, which are the chairman, who we've kind of already taken care of, the Omertas, who run Gamora, the White Glove Society. I think those are the ones on the strip. So they run kind of the main casinos. The Omertas are they're very much like a new Reno from Fallout 2 kind of family. They're sort of classic. They're described, the leaders are Nero and Big Sal, right? Kind of classic mafioso kind of stuff. The White Glove Society run the Ultralux, and they're kind of described as being very refined, but Benny, says Yes Man, found them very creepy. Then there are the Boomers, the Cons, and the Brotherhood of Steel. The Boomers are a group of people who live on the Nellis Air Force Base that's outside of Vegas, and they shell anyone with artillery if they try to approach. There are the Great Cons, who Yes Man describes as dirty like animals.
Jesus.
Yeah, and that they've been around for a long time, and everyone's basically kicked their ass, but they won't go away. Like, he talks through how, not only has like Caesar's Legion pushed them out of places, but so has NCR, but they just keep moving around. And Yes Man does not have a high opinion of the Cons at all. And the Brotherhood of Steel are out somewhere in the desert, it's also very funny that this is like the Brotherhood of Steel have been mentioned, when the Bethesda games are so obsessed with the Brotherhood of Steel.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, again, a carryover from Fallout 2, where you meet the Brotherhood of Steel at the beginning of that game, and they're just like, we're the Brotherhood of Steel, we're watching you, we have absolutely nothing useful to say or do otherwise, and then that's it. And here it's just like, oh yeah, the Brotherhood of Steel is somewhere out in the desert. Mr. House was sending out Securitron patrols, and they were like kidnapping the robots essentially. And he explains that they are like, they seek out technology, but they also want to keep technology from other people. And Yes Man is basically like, do a survey of these people, of these factions, and figure out whether or not you want to exterminate them. I believe exterminate is like a word that he uses.
Dang.
Yeah. And then he says, when you're ready to move on, you should go to Fortification Hill and find a bunker that Mr. House appears to be very interested in. This seems to be where the platinum chip needs to go next. And you can ask, like, well, what's going to happen when I use the platinum chip at Fortification Hill? And he's like, oh, I don't know. It might install some like weapon systems upgrades or something like that, or who knows what sort of cool stuff you might find down there. Like maybe a giant robot or something.
Some sort of primed liberty-loving robot?
Yeah. So again, like there's something here with Yes Man and kind of the what we talked about actually during this show, right? Is the Bethesda sort of the way that Bethesda games get designed, where you can do anything, right? The games themselves are kind of a yes man. You can do whatever you want. All paths are kind of constantly open to you. And except here, that's not how it's going to work, right? The things that the paths that you follow in New Vegas very much close off other paths.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's what I learned. And I left. I was like, okay, I'll think about that. I need to go talk to Mr. House since he invited me to see him, and I left the Tops.
Did you just go immediately to Mr. House then?
Well, I stepped outside and I was met by in one after the other, an NCR trooper who comes up and he's like, hey, like General or Colonel Crocker, like someone named Crocker, right? Some NCR person wants to see you. I don't know why. I don't know how they found out about me, but they want to see me. So that gets added to my little map. And then a dude in a suit and a fedora comes up and he's like, Hail Kaiser. And I'm like, oh, crap. But he's like, Caesar has been watching you, and he's actually really impressed with what you've done, and so he's forgiven you your crimes, including the assassination of Vulpes Inculta.
Oh, whoa, that's right, because you killed Vulpes Inculta.
Yes.
For me, this is Vulpes Inculta.
Oh. Yeah, I can ask this guy, like, who the hell are you? And he's like, well, I'm a Frumentari, which are, Caesar's spies that go into plainclothes and infiltrate places. So, yeah, I get forgiven my crimes. And, last episode, I didn't really mention this as much, but I've been stalked by Legion assassination squads this entire time. Up until this point, they have been spawning and attacking me as I've been going places.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to look at in the footage.
Yeah. So, that's been forgiven me. Like, I killed some people, but Caesar, for whatever reason, thinks that I'm cool. So he wants me to come see him. And it just so happens that he is set up on Fortification Hill, which is the place where Yes Man told me to go. But yeah, so I meet those people, and then I head out to the Lucky 38 and I meet Mr. House.
Yeah, the Vulpes Inculta is really funny there because one of the things you can say to him is like, how are you here on the strip? And he's like, this isn't even my first time here. He's like, I can go wherever I want. And he's like wearing a fedora and like a big coat. It's like, my man, come on. Yeah, this is where I did my little side quest, I think. So for what were the name of the twins who we were doing quests for before?
The twins?
The siblings. Maybe they're not twins. They're siblings. In the atomic.
Oh, the Garretts. Yes,
the Garretts. So we did the one where we were recruiting people to work for the one Garrett, and then I did the other quest for the sister, where I was going around and collecting debts for her. And the last end of that quest was there's a guy who skipped out on some debts. His name is didn't write it down. I just wrote final debt guy. But you gotta get his debts and get his hat. And so I talked to him and I was like, hey, buddy, just give me your hat and give me your money and get out of here, and then I'll just say you're dead. And he was like, over my dead body, you're getting my hat. And so I had to kill him, and I had to get his hat. Yeah, it was unfortunate. And then I put the hat on thinking, yeah, now I'm the guy. And it's like a special hat, it's cool. But you have to turn it in for the quest, unfortunately. And so she was also another person who was like, I heard what you did at the tops. Don't do that here. Kick your butt if you do that. So it is interesting that kind of resonates all around, at least this area, when you do that stuff. But that was kind of the only side questy thing that I did, or major side quest. I started another side quest. I haven't completed it yet, but with someone named Emily Ordle. Did you get this quest from her?
Yes, she talked to me, I think, the first time after I stepped outside of the Lucky 38.
That might be it. That might have been when I got it. But anyway, she is someone who I think is one of the followers of the Apocalypse,
yes,
if I was getting that right. And she basically says, hey, why don't you go help us spy on Mr. House a little bit by like wearing this transponder. And so I haven't done that yet, but I'll probably do that in the next episode.
I actually did this quest already. Do you want me to spoil it for you? Or shall we?
Sure, yeah.
Oh.
Is it worth doing?
I mean, you get some experience from it. It's very easy. She gives you a bug. You take it in and you can bug his computer network, and you go back out and you talk to her, and she's like, oh, this is fantastic. We've got so much stuff. And then it lasts about 40 seconds before House's automated systems find and disable it. So that's it.
Great. Great. A+ quest.
Yeah, it does feel like they maybe had an idea for more stuff there that got cut short, unless kind of the point here is to underscore for us that the followers of the Apocalypse are, on the one hand, idealists, and on the other hand, just like kind of milquetoast. They're like, oh, well, Mr. House, he took out our bug. Guess I'll go home.
They really got a lot of spirit, a lot of oomph until they don't.
Yeah.
It's real like I'm gonna build an airplane from scratch. I don't know how airplanes work. Okay, then I guess I can't build an airplane.
Yeah.
like all right. Well, it seems like there's a lot of additional steps in the middle there that you could pursue and improve upon, perhaps in this bugging operation. But
Yeah.
oh well. But yeah. So yeah. After that, I walked into the Lucky 38. See what Mr. House wanted.
Mm-hmm. And you go up and you go all the way up to the top of the Lucky 38, which, as we've established, looks like a giant roulette wheel suspended above New Vegas. And we've got more BioShock all over the place.
Oh yeah.
What do you think of Mr. House?
So you go up to, well, so you go in this casino and there's like these security robots everywhere. And then you go to the elevator. You actually have to talk to Victor to go up the elevator. I don't quite know why that's the case, but you have to do that. And you go up to the top, and then you go into this room. And lo and behold, Mr. House is not a person at all. He's in fact a big computer. He's Howard Hawks trapped in a computer. Mm-hmm. And he's just like a real jerk. Like he's figured all this stuff out, right? And like you can talk to him about all kinds of stuff about factions. The basic pitch is he wants the platinum chip because it contains information that he spent a lot of money, like you said earlier, and a lot of time trying to get, and now I have it. He's very motivated for that, and he'll monologue at you a little bit if you push on it about why it matters that he has like presence in the wasteland, particularly here in the Mojave, and why it's, for example, not part of the NCR yet, because he kind of provides a buffer against the Legion and could probably fight the Legion and help the NCR. But if the NCR tried to forcibly annex Vegas into the NCR, they would have to fight Mr. House, and that would make them weak against Caesar. And so there's this kind of like elaborate multiple operator, very Obsidian thinking, in my mind, right? This like strongly materialist universe of like the 8 different ways that everyone who's involved in this conflict have to think about everyone else who's involved in the conflict, and then like all the tertiary parties. And he kind of lays that out for you a little bit, and then just demands the chip from you. And I don't know, I did you give him the chip? I don't know, what did you end up doing here? I took a different route.
Well,
to begin with.
Well, Lucky Nell is looking for the person who is going to best serve the interests of luck in the Mojave. That does not seem to be what the Legion is doing. We already established the Legion is perverting the noble art of gambling. Mr. House has some respect for luck, has some respect for gambling. Nell kind of likes some of the stuff Mr. House is saying. And I, also I like the way Mr. House is written. For instance, like when you talk to him, he acknowledges that you snubbed him, that you did not immediately go and talk to him, that you went and did something else, which I think is really cool. And then the other thing that happens in kind of this conversation between Nell and Mr. House is that you can do the Fallout thing where you're trying to sort of like talk around the character and like, work them into a place where you can extort more money from them or whatever. And you go through this whole thing and he gets irritated with you when you do this. Like he doesn't respond like a video game NPC. He responds like a sort of entity with goals. And after you have that whole conversation, he tells you like you played that hand very badly, So there's like a weird responsiveness to House that I think is interesting, and the way that his like conversations are scripted. Also as performance, I think he's really well done. He's really well written. He's voiced by Rene Auberjonois. I think that's how you say his last name, who was Odo on Star Trek. And you can ask it, like, you can do again, sort of the video game thing where I said something like, you haven't even asked me about Benny or something like that. Like, you haven't asked me about this guy who was your former lieutenant that I went and murdered very efficiently. And he's like, that's because Benny became unimportant to Benny, became unimportant to the second he didn't have the platinum chip anymore or whatever. And then he says, revenge doesn't interest me, progress does. And he says, progress, right?
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'm sorry, I've denied you your primal, like your primate hooting about victory or something.
He says like a primate yelp.
Yes, your primate yelp.
Which is a really what's the famous literary line about a yelp?
Oh gosh, I don't know now.
Hold on, as part of this episode, looking stuff up. I'm just going famous literary line.
It's Whitman. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world.
Yeah. And so I mean, right, that this is a, like, you and you dumb Whitmans, you dumb Walt Whitmans.
Yes.
You humans.
Yes.
Yeah, he was like a bit,
Yeah.
House tells you he's like, before he became a computer, I don't know exactly how that worked, but before he became a computer, he was like a billionaire multiple times over in this world. So, like, he is like the furthest, representation of like American capitalist ingenuity, blah, 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 right? Like, if we were to make this game today, he would be just Jeff Bezos.
Yes, exactly. He talks about, like, the reason he's in this situation is he's like, I ran the simulations and it was a mathematical certainty that within the next 15 years there would be a nuclear war. And so I immediately began planning for sort of my fail-safe plan to preserve this. He says, I could not save the whole world, nor did I want to. But I could save the Strip, and with it, perhaps, the future of humanity.
This is the plot of the Assassin's Creed video games too, by the way. Not the Las Vegas Strip, but all the rest of what you just said. That's basically the like meta plot for those games.
Great. Yeah. So House explains how he did all these plans. He had his Securitrons, and in the end, it turned out he was 20 hours short. In his estimations, he had the platinum chip manufactured. It was supposed to be delivered by courier. It was manufactured in California. It was supposed to be delivered to him by courier within a day after its completion. And it just so happened by that afternoon, the war had started. And as he puts it, the world had ended. And House explains that the only reason Vegas survived as well as it did is that he did have all of these security systems in place. He had like anti-missile defenses. He was disabling warheads, so on and so forth. But the strain of protecting the Strip really overtaxed his systems as he's, kind of integrated himself into his own computer network. And he went into a coma for a long, long time until finally he rebooted, met the NCR and did the whole geopolitical stuff that you just mentioned. Oh, the other thing, this actually came up in the Discord, was like, how is Hoover Dam still operational after the war? And House just mentions very incidentally here, like, the NCR actually fixed it up. Like, the deal that House made with the NCR is that they were allowed to take the dam and repair it and restore it to operation so long as they gave the Strip some percentage of its output.
Yeah, the Strip always gets 5%. Someone told me that in this session, that 95% can be sent back to the NCR proper, but 5% has to be earmarked for the Vegas Strip. Also, just I want to make a quick note that for the rest of my life now, anytime I'm hungover and I don't want to do anything, I'm just going to yell, I'm rebooting like Mr. House after a long, long time. I need to rest like Mr. House for a very long time so I can reboot. I will be stronger than ever before as I lie prone on the ground.
Yeah, so Mr. House is, the other thing that's interesting about House is that, like, he's just like, you're working for me now, by the way. Like, give me the platinum chip. And so I hand over the chip, and he shows me what he can do with it. It turns out that his Securitrons have been operating on a buggy version of their initial software. And he takes me down to the basement, and he shows me the weapons that the Securitrons use. And he's like, these are their secondary weapons, actually. This is not even, the utmost of my power. I can, he installs the new firmware with the platinum chip, or the new software, I should say. And now the Securitrons, their faces stop being cops and become soldiers, and they have grenades and missile launchers. So he says, I think that they have a 235% increase in their efficacy. And all of the Securitrons on the strip now have these new abilities. So I'm like, well, okay, that seems pretty cool. Why are you showing your hands so fast, Mr. House? And he's like, you fool. I'm not showing my hand. I'm showing one card, and I'm allowing all of my enemies to fixate on this. So everyone's going to be talking about my Securitron upgrades. They're going to be wondering what I'm up to, and they don't know what I'm up to. And he tells me what we need to do is get to Fortification Hill. So this is the third time this has come up. Yes Man has told me to go there. The Caesar guy has told me to go there, and now House wants me to go there. And he wants me to go into the bunker that Yes Man mentioned, take the platinum chip, and install more software upgrades or something like that. And that's kind of where we're hanging with Mr. House at the end of this. Did you talk to Jane? I think that's her name.
Well, no, and I didn't quite go the exact direction that you went here, because initially I told Mr. House, I said, I think I'm going to hang on to this chip. And he said, no, I don't think you will. And I said, I don't know. They're going to hang on to this chip a little bit. And he didn't take too kindly to that, so he made all his robots fight me. But here's something really interesting. I took a perk, maybe last episode or the one before that when I succeed on a critical hit with a melee weapon, it knocks my enemy down.
Mm-hmm.
When I have like the straight razor equipped, it has like increased crit chance, and it also swings like 80 swings per second. Like that thing is whipping around really fast. Have you ever seen a Securitron ragdoll?
No, I have not.
Well, you can watch it in the footage because it's
great,
because they flop around and they have unique animations for getting up. And when you make them ragdoll, they ping forward far away from you really fast. They immediately become weightless and just kind of flop all over. So you'll be able to see that. But ultimately, they got the best of me, and so I ended up reloading my save and giving it to Mr. House. But I didn't talk to her. Who'd you say? What's her name? Sarah? What'd you say?
I think her name is Jane. She's like a lady Securitron who's hanging out by the elevator. And she's like, there's some like creepy resonance here where she is Mr. House's girl, right? And she just like fawns about him and talks about how great he is, and she like keeps him company, quote unquote. And she also reveals that she is a neurocomputational matrix imaged from a real woman that Mr. House knew in the distant past. So there's just like, some AI ethics questions happening here, although we don't get too deeply into them. So, I don't know, like, she's there. If you find snow globes in the wasteland, you can give them to her, and she will reward you with caps, because it turns out Mr. House loves snow globes because, Citizen Kane.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah, you can ask him. You're like, so what's up with the snow globe thing? And he's like, what of it? I just find the idea of a diorama within a little glass dome to be soothing.
Nice sleeves you're wearing that on. Fallout New Vegas.
Right? Like, it's like, I don't think I need to read as much psychoanalysis as I have done to understand what's going on with you, Robert. But yeah, he's like, what I'm offering you is a future, you and the remains of the human race. So is it too much future? We'll find out, because Eleanor is trying to make her final decisions here about where her allegiance lies.
Yeah, I think I went and had a little conversation. I went to the NCR, who we were talking about, right? And they have a little outpost here, and I talked to them, and I think they seem okay. They're not trying to enslave anybody. It doesn't seem like,
That's
and
good.
They're not megalomaniacal robots with missile launchers. I'm kind of worried about that at this point. And yeah, they have like a modest office space. and like a third term appointed official. You know, just good old governance. And so I went and talked with them and talked to this ambassador fella, and he said, yeah, you know what? The NCR is having some troubles with these boomer fellas. You want to go talk to them and see what they're up to? It'd be great if they weren't killing us all the time. And I said, yeah, I'll go check that out. So I think I'll do that next episode. I'll go see what the NCR is interested in me doing for them.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go along with you. I will also go see the boomers. Because I'm sure Mr. House will have to take care of them eventually. Or someone will,
Ba-bum.
let's just say. The other things that I did... Well, did you do anything else in the strip?
Nope.
Okay, so I did a couple of other quests here very quickly. One I already mentioned, which is the Tommy Torini thing. I found a guy named Billy Knight, who's like a comedian trying to practice his material on the strip. And I talked to him, and I'm like... Wouldn't this be more helpful if you were doing it in front of an audience instead of just like screaming it at people from the sidewalk? And he's like, huh. Well, Tommy Torini over at the Tops is looking for acts, so go check him out. Then you mentioned in a previous episode, the comedian at the Atomic Wrangler, that ghoul Hadrian. So I drop by and I see him and I'm like, hey, Hadrian, are you looking for work? Because Tommy Torini at the Tops is looking for new acts, and Hadrian tells me he'd love to try it, but he's actually stuck in a contract with the Garretts. And this is interesting because this feels like an intentional echo of the situation with like Gob at the beginning of Fallout 3, where Gob is the ghoul who has been enslaved. Basically, like he has been purchased as a slave or something. Or no. I think he like owes a debt to the bartender.
Yeah, he's like an indentured
Megaton.
servant, quote unquote.
Right. So it's like a weird echo of what the hell was his name? Sulik?
Mm-hmm. Kinda.
Yeah. So anyway, this is like the second echo of that, except it ends up like being much easier because one, Hadrian is not in fact like indentured. He's just in a contract. And I go over to Garrett and I'm like, hey, can I get Hadrian out of his contract? And he's like, no, like he's my employee and I need him to make money. And then there's a speech check for me where I'm just like, you'll probably find someone better if you let him go. And Garrett's like, you know what? You're probably right. Rips up the contract. So I can tell Hadrian to head on over to Torini and audition. Then I mentioned a couple episodes ago finding a guitar player by the side of the road, the Lonesome Drifter. I drop by and I see him. I let him know that Torini is looking for acts, and he sets off. Then I go back to Novak, where in the motel there, I met this character earlier, but I didn't talk about him on the show because I was saving him for this point. A character named Bruce Isaac, who's hiding out in one of the rooms. And he is like, in a suit, kind of a very suave lounge singer type. And I recognize him. The game implies that, I, the courier, Lucky Nell, have, been around the world a couple of times. And so I'm like, hey, I remember you. You're that lounge singer from New Reno. And he's like, oh, yeah, you've seen me. You've seen me play at the Shark Club. And he mentions that he had to run away from New Reno, which we saw in Fallout 2, because he had a bad experience. He was working for Mr. Bishop. The Bishops were one of the families in control of New Reno back in Fallout 2, and they're apparently still going strong now. But he had a sort of altercation with Bishop where Bishop owed him money and Bishop wasn't paying him. And so, Bruce kind of took the money that he was owed without Mr. Bishop offering it. And then, as he adds, also, I kind of sort of plowed his daughter.
Jeez.
Which is, again, a thing that you could have done in New Reno. Like, the Bishops were specifically the family that you could, like, both rob and, like, you could cuckold Bishop, and then also, I think, sleep with his daughter.
Yep.
That happens. And I'm like, well, you know what? Go talk to Tommy Torini. The strip will make sure you're really secure. And he's like, that's great. I love that idea. So that's how I complete that quest. I also talked to, I go to the Vault 21 casino motel thing. Did you go in here?
Mm-mm. Nope.
So there was a Vault Tech vault on the strip, Vault 21.
Oh. I saw like a door to it from the inside of the Tops casino, and I like couldn't get there, and so it was not immediately on my plate, so I didn't go there.
Oh, interesting. So I go in there, and it's not a vault anymore. It's been converted into a motel, and it's run by a woman named Sarah Weintraub, who will take you on a tour down into the vault, and she explains the history. So Vault 21 was a Vault Tech vault, and it had, its crazy kooky experiment. And what its crazy kooky experiment was McKinsey Works game space. Vault 21 was a vault of perfect equality and perfect symmetry, where every decision was made by gambling. When there was like a community decision to be made, when people had differing opinions, their dispute was settled through some sort of game of chance. And that was considered fair. And so at some point, when Mr. House woke up and started doing things, he sent a delegation and got the vault to open up. And there was some sort of game that was played, like, of course, like factions broke out within the vault itself. And I'm waiting to see if I'm going to learn more about this, because it seems like, Mr. House, being Mr. House, probably stacked the deck in his favor in some way, and then also was very insistent that after the vault opened, that he come down and fill the bottom levels with concrete. So now only the top level is still open, and that's where Sarah runs the motel and casino. And I think it's interesting. Like, I don't know if the vault is filled with concrete because Obsidian didn't want us to have a full vault to run around in the strip, or if there is something specific that Mr. House would not want people to have access to that would come in a Vault Tech vault. I don't know if that's a thing that gets clarified in this game. I don't remember, but it's something I'm interested in because it just seems weird otherwise. Like, there's nothing to me that immediately jumps out as like, why would Mr. House want to fill the vault with concrete?
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if there's additional lore that we can learn about it, or if people know, leave us a comment, let us know. It could also be that they've already kind of been down that road of like pure Gygaxian ruined vault design, or like vault that no one lives in design, and it's not interesting.
That's probably
true.
They
know that, and like Bethesda in Fallout 3 kind of ignored that information. Like wandering around in like empty ruined vaults is not particularly interesting, right? And they turn them into dungeons, but even in that point, they're not particularly, it's not really worth your time. But so yeah, maybe this is just people learning what the engaging part of vault, of any of the vault stuff, is like, here's the idea, here's like a little sliver of it. It's not really the vault architecture. So, that might have been it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's Vault 21. Next door is a place called Michelangelo's, which is a workshop where Michelangelo, the artist, is creating neon signs and billboards for the strip. And he's got an order put out for Mr. House. And you can find, so here's the other thing about Michelangelo. Turns out he's Sarah's brother. His name is actually Sheldon Weintraub, and like Michelangelo is his pseudonym for his artistic endeavors. And he's working for Mr. House making signs, or various other people in the strip, but he has a problem, which is that he grew up in the vault and he has very bad agoraphobia. And he's actually been very uncomfortable since having to leave the vault, and you can hack Sarah's computer and find some emails with her and him where he kind of talks about this. So he doesn't feel great about going, and this is the problem is he needs to go out and see the old world signage for kind of his inspiration. So he offered, I'm like, hey, I could help you out. So he gives me a camera and he's like, go find these neon signs for me. And there's like, it's the dinosaur in Novak, the Bison Steve sign back in Prim, the sign outside of McCarran Airport / Camp McCarran Air Force Base, and then the one outside the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters. And so I pop around because I've been to most of these places already. I take my pictures and I go back and I get some caps from him. Makes him happy. Head back over to Vault 21. And I meet a guy in like the diner there, right? Remember those little like vault kitchen diner kind of areas?
Oh, yeah, where Tonk had his birthday party.
Yeah, the birthday party place. Well, there's a guy sitting down there in Vault 21 with like, he's just sitting at a table eating and he's wearing a fedora. His name is Carlitos. And I talked to him and he's clearly got something going on. He mentions that he's worked for the Emertas and now he's kind of on the outs with them. He feels he's very sad about something. And after talking with him enough, passing some speech checks, I find out that the reason he's sad is that he has a girl. And so we're back in, Norlandia. There's a woman in trouble. Carlitos had a girl, Joanna. He met her at the Atomic Wrangler, and he was an enforcer for the Emertas. But when he met Joanna, head over heels in love. Brings her from the Atomic Wrangler, puts her up in Gamora, the Emertas casino, and is like happy, right? Happy there with her, and she's working because the other thing, the Omertas are the sort of, they're rigging games, they're corruption graft, but also like sex work. They're running like prostitution rings and things of that nature. So Joanna is a sex worker at Gamora, and Carlitos is fine, with that. They're happy, but then there is someone else in the family, a guy named Cachino, who does not like Carlitos, and he covets Joanna. So he turns Nero and Big Sal, the heads of the Emertas, against Carlitos by saying that Carlitos is basically stealing from the family. So he gets kicked out, and then Cachino has, like, because Joanna is, already at Gamora, is stuck with the Omertas and stuck with Cachino, who has nothing between him and her now, right? So he asks me to go check on Joanna, deliver some messages, let her know that he is still thinking about her and that he wants to get her out somehow. I head over to Gamora and I find Joanna. She's in like the courtyard sort of dancing, and she immediately talks to me and she's like, oh, if you come to like satiate your desires or whatever. She's got kind of this, spiel that she has. She's kind of implicitly working as a dominatrix or something. And another perk that Lucky Nell has is, in addition to Black Widow, is Cherchez la Femme, which is Black Widow, but for ladies.
Dang.
And so I start hitting on Joanna. I sweet talk her a little bit, and I ask her if she, wants to go have a private conversation maybe with me up in her room. And she's like, oh yeah, sure thing. And so she heads up to her room, and I follow her up after. And I explain to her once we get there that I am here on behalf of Carlitos, who is still thinking about her and wanted to pass her a message. He in fact wants to get her out, and he has made a plan. But Joanna, she's on the one hand excited, but on the other hand sort of dismayed because she can't leave her girls. So not only do we have, kind of the woman in trouble thing, but she has her friends here, other sex workers whom she wants to get out. And so there's a couple of sort of conversation tracks here. One of the things you can say is that she doesn't look well. I don't have a high enough med skill to like pass this speech check, but like clearly she's, maybe addicted to something or she's sick. And she herself talks about like how she hates being here now that Carlitos is gone and Cachino has his, claws in her, because it's not specific, but like Cachino is making her do things that she does not like. So it's a bad scene. Very, very bad. And she calls it his perversions is what she says. So we make up a plan. Carlitos' plan was like, I can get her out if she goes to the lobby at midnight when sort of Gamora is at its busiest, and if she's in disguise, we can get her out and get her to Freeside. But there's also, if you want to get us some help, there are some mercenaries who owe me a favor, and they're over at the Atomic Wrangler. So I think this is after I talk to her, I go back and talk to him, and this is when he tells me this. So I go to the Atomic Wrangler, and the most incredible thing in any Fallout game ever has happened. I want to be clear. I don't think I have ever done this quest.
Mm-hmm.
I have played New Vegas, maybe twice, sort of fully, and I just have never stumbled upon this quest, and what happened next is amazing. I walk into the Atomic Wrangler and I follow the quest marker over to these two guys standing near the stage. One of them is named Littlebeard and one of them is named Big Beard. when you talk to, I try talking to Littlebeard, and he says, whoever's got the biggest whiskers does the talking.
Uh-huh.
And that's all he'll say.
Okay.
So I turn from Littlebeard to Big Beard, and he says, let me guess, you want to know my secret? How I got my beard to grow in so thick. Both of these men, by the way, have beards.
This is making me sweat. This is like a like something from like the dead middle of a Richard Kelly film.
It's incredible to me because there's this is not like deeply written, this quest up until this point. Like as I said, it's very noirish. It's kind of dealing in broad tropes, but with some character. And for me, it's very much like, oh, we've hit the end of the simulation vibes. Where it's just like whoever was like designing this quest was like, yeah, we've got some mercenaries. What are they going to be? Oh, Big Beard and Little Beard.
Yeah, just throw some placeholder text in there, whatever. Have him talk about the beards, right? We'll clean it up later.
Yeah, so I ask him, he says, you want to know that my secret, how I got my beard to grow in so thick. And so I tell him, I'm like, yeah, no, tell me, what's your secret? How do you do this with your beard? And he says, sorry, but I can't tell you that. Trade secret. So then I ask him, well, do you remember Carlitos? And he's like, it rings a bell. Why are you asking? And I'm like, well, Carlitos is turning in his favor. He needs you and Littlebeard to meet him in Freeside so we can escort some people out. And he's like, that's all we need to know, right? Tell us when and where, and we will be there. He can count on us. And then I ask him, why? What did he do? Like, why is it that you owe him a favor or a debt or whatever? And he says, let's just say it had something to do with the beards and leave it at that. And then when you close out the conversation, he says something like, the beards will be there.
Uh-huh.
So just this happens, this whole sort of scene. And I'm like, okay, head back to Joanna. Let her know kind of our plan. And she's like, okay, we need to wait until midnight. I wait until just before midnight because I cannot stand being late. And if I go past midnight, then it'll be like 12:14 and I can't be late for Joanna. So I wait until 11:14 and then spend the next 45 minutes jumping around her room waiting for midnight to come. Because this is just how I play these games. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, like and it's funny because you can tell her like, can we go? And she's like, no, we need to wait until midnight. And then at midnight, you talk to her and she's like, okay, let's go. And she puts on her disguise, which is before this, she's been wearing sort of like a kind of bondage fetish gear kind of outfit. And it just immediately switches to a pink dress, a fedora, and sunglasses in kind of she looks kind of like Drill wearing a hat.
Well, this is also like traditional femme fatale clothes though, right? Like,
yes.
The Drill wearing a hat to 1960s neo-noir femme fatale Venn diagram, closer than you think.
So she goes out to the lobby where there are two women waiting, and they are also wearing dresses and like hats with these fascinators on them, and their names are Disguised Hooker. It's just two NPCs, and that's what they're called.
Yep.
But Joanna shows up, and she's like, okay, let's go. So we walk out of the casino, and we're heading toward the gate, and I'm like, okay, is something going to happen? Is anything going to happen? Camera gets caught, whips around, and it's Mr. Holdout, and he's like, hey, blah, 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 blah. And he says like some weird thing, and I'm like, what's going on? And then I don't have any options to like say anything more to him. I just have to end the conversation, and that's it. Like, this is somehow I did not trip that flag for him until just this moment as I'm trying to escort these NPCs out of the city. And he offers me no information, like does nothing. It's very strange. But I get them out into Freeside and they're running. And as I, am following them along, I see Carlitos and the Beards up ahead. And wouldn't you know it, some Omerta thugs appear. and they're like, hey, we're we've heard some word of this and we're here to put a stop to it. But luckily, I am Lucky Nell, and there's a speech check there for me that I pass where I tell them like, oh, you didn't hear? Actually, Carlitos is taking the money that he stole and he's giving that back to the Omertas in exchange for Joanna. And then the Omertas are like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thanks. Like, don't bother telling anyone else that we kind of made this little mistake of trying to screw this deal. Just don't mention that to anyone. Talk to you later. Bye. And they run off. And then Carlitos is like, oh, thank you so much. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. And then you have two options. One is, of course, the sort of like normal video game thing where you're like, please give me $200 or whatever. But that's a barter check that I can't pass. So my only other option is just like, doing a good deed is reward enough. And then that's how this quest ends.
That's role playing for you.
Yep. Yeah, and so that's all the fun that I had on the strip.
Lord, are there other quests we haven't done? There's got to be like a bunch.
Oh yeah, no, there's a bunch of there are more quests. With the families. Oh, that's the other thing actually is, Joanna told me before she runs off. She's like, again, thank you so much. I don't have any money, but I can tell you something. Cachino mentioned that the Omertas are working on some sort of plan to get even with Mr. House. I don't know what that means, but maybe that's useful information for you. So we've got this interesting situation where Mr. House is in charge of the strip, but people, like the people who live on the strip, are not exactly happy with the way that he runs it. The Weintraubs are not happy that, the vault got filled with concrete. The Omertas are, like, Benny was plotting to overthrow Mr. House. The Omertas appear to be doing something similar. And then here's Lucky Nell kind of suspended between all of these people, trying to figure out where she's going to place her bets. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Tonk just thinks government might be okay. Have you thought about government?
Not neo-libertarian hellscape?
No, just government.
Oh, this reminds me, the other thing that's really great is that because after you upgrade the Securitrons, like everyone on the strip, all they are doing is talking about how much they hate the upgraded Securitrons.
Yeah, they're mean.
Yeah, they're like, did they really need rocket launchers?
Yeah, they did.
But I think that's good too, because it establishes like, you didn't do a good thing. Like, it's not like people aren't happy when the robots that surveil them at all hours get suddenly more powerful. That's not a thing that makes a populace content.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's it for this this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more of the thing. We don't quite know what we're doing next, right? I mean, we're going to the Boomers, but in a broad sense, it's what we're doing.
Yeah, we're gonna try to meet the Boomers and figure out what's going on there.
Hashtag meet the Boomers. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of funny jokes about that. You can go to patreon.com/rangetouch in order to support what we're doing here on the show. If you want to listen to this, if you're checking it out on YouTube, for example, and you want to listen to this merely as a podcast in your favorite podcast app or feed of choice, you can go to patreon.com/rangetouch in order to do that. If you support us at $3 a month, you get access to that. If you support us at $5 a month, you get access to a special Patreon podcast and the bonus episodes of our show, Just King Things. We are still on the path. Listen, just check this out. 2 seconds. I know that when I start doing this patter at the end, some percentage of people, you just click away. Listen, we are trying to get to $4,500 a month on the Patreon. When we get there, we will start a podcast where we are going to be reading through all of the internet legendary weird thing, Homestuck. Mm-hmm. We're going to be explaining it to people. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about it critically. Mm-hmm. Using the whole brain, using the speech.
You're going to get all of my memories of being a Homestuck reader live when it was updating, and the sort of the narrative of the way that fandom formed, and just what was it like to have been there during the summer of Homestuck.
We got to sloganize that, Michael. We got to say oral history. You're gonna get some oral history.
Yeah. You'll get my oral history of the Homestuck fandom.
Maybe we'll have a guest.
My particular take.
We haven't talked about any of this. Maybe I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go hard on it. But if you want to hear that happen, if you want to check that out, if you want to hear something that is powerful and useful and explanatory and funny and other stuff, other excellent adjectives that I can't think of because I'm so tired. Then you can go to patreon.com/rangetouch. If you support us for as little as $1 a month, you're helping us get there. We're actually not that far off from it. We are closer than we've ever been before. And you can help us get over that line into the realm of new podcasts. The other thing I was going to say is that if you're checking this out on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That helps us out a whole lot. Make sure you smash that thumbs up button, that like button. Maybe leave us a little comment. Michael, what should people comment and tell us about in the comments this time?
If you could fill any structure on Earth with concrete, what would it be?
That's great. I'm thinking about that already myself. We'll hit that little heart button on the ones that we like the most, so the best comments will filter to the top. Thanks. I want to say in a general sense, thanks for the comments that people leave. They're generally pretty good. We have good commenters on our YouTube page. Can't say that about all of YouTube. I'll tell you that's for sure. So, thanks so much for doing that. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a little bit of hashtag Boomer Thoughts, and we'll learn a little bit more about this world of Fallout New Vegas. Michael, you want to take us out with the catchphrase?
War never changes, but somehow we still had an hour-and-a-half long episode this time. I'm sorry.
Everything changed when the bombs fell, except for